Can you explain why parasites in humans are an issue and why people should care to learn about this information?
I'm going to give the definition so it kind of helps everybody in the community understand. A parasite definition is anything that feeds off a host and or in the Latin term an unwanted dinner guest. So the unfortunate part about parasites in the Western medicine culture is that we've just made this such a taboo subject
Yeah.
that it's not talked about at all. Where other countries, they're like, yeah, we know this is an issue. We arm our community and our people to understand it and also with medications. And the top three Western medicine countries that just have made this such a taboo subject are the United States, Canada, and Australia.
Yeah.
I own a company where I make our own parasite cleanse called Parafy, and those are the top three countries we ship to. So they're also Western medicine countries. I think that we've just been so indoctrinated to think that because we're first world countries, that there's no way that we could get a parasite. And if we did, it would just slide out of us. But in reality, that's just not really the way that anatomy and physiology works. And so they lay eggs, they're microscopic, they get into our blood, our tissue, and our muscle. We can catch them from food, our pets. I caught ours from water because our water was it had parasites in them in Hoodsport where all of this went down for us. So I think we've just been kind of told that this isn't a thing. They can absorb 90% of our nutrients while they're
Wow.
just chilling in our bodies. And they're weighted down by heavy metals, which we're constantly consuming heavy metals and plastics, which they consume as well. And then it weights them down. They're coated with a biofilm, so they're hard to remove. You have to do it in a specific order. And that's why I created the kits that I created, because there is a system that you have to do when you cleanse. But they've been kind of removed out of our textbooks. And when you are reading and indoctrinated by the textbook and it's told that like this just isn't an issue, we're just not continuing to research it, where other countries do realize this is an issue and they cleanse.
Just want to help people understand it more. So you said a parasite is something that feeds off of a host.
Mhm.
What are the different types of parasites, and where does candida and worms come into the equation? What's the difference between all of that?
So, candida is an overgrowth of yeast, and we all have yeast in our body. But when it starts to be fed by like sugar, it starts to overgrow, and then it starts to tell you to eat more sugar, which then that's a parasite. It's literally living off of you, and that's the definition. But there are multiple styles of parasites. You've got lice, that's a parasite, and scabies, that's a parasite. But what we talk about is protozoas, which is like Giardia, D. fragilis, and Crypto. Cryptosporidium parvium is parvo, which kills puppies, and that's what I had. And it started to shut my organs down because I had it for such an extended period of time from our water that it was like just feeding off of me. And then there's nematodes, which are physical worms like tapeworm, roundworm, pinworms, flatworms, whipworms, and hookworms. And those actually are physical, which you can see in the toilet at times. Not always, because if you're on a good cleanse, it will demolish them and you shouldn't see them. And if you do, it means that you're one of the three cleansers. You're a digger, a flusher, or a looker. So, I mean, it's kind of like it's its own style, right? So, when you're doing a cleanse, you could physically see a worm and you may not because you might have a microscopic. So that's kind of where I think some confusion can come in, is that there are, microscopic and then
Yeah.
there's physical.
What are the top red flags that you see? Health conditions that people are struggling with on a daily basis that you believe parasites could be the root cause of? What are the most common red flags?
Mostly grinding of the teeth, skin issues, IBS, IBD, being up all night. So insomnia, that's a big one because they're nocturnal creatures. They wake up around 7 p.m. They tell you to go ahead and eat so that they have breakfast. So if you are a night snacker, specifically sugar and salt, you really should do a cleanse. We really should just be be doing cleanses 3 to 4 times a year. Honestly, I mean, we're so exposed to them every single day that like we should be more proactive. But I would say that if you have unusual symptoms and your blood work comes back, you take a drink of water and bloat. If you are craving food and you're like, I don't know why I'm craving this, you should do a cleanse.
If you have been thinking about doing a parasite cleanse, but you're not sure where to start, this is your sign. Kim has graciously given us a discount code to share with you all that will allow you to get 10% off all of the products on rogershood.com. Visit rogershood.com or check the top link in the description and enter code BioPulse. That is code BioPulse, BIOPULSE, during the checkout process to get 10% off your entire order. So whether you're wanting to detox mold, parasites, or heavy metals, head to the top link in the description and get your kit now. You mentioned that parasites hide in your muscle tissue, in your cells. Can they hide in your brain and the nervous system?
Yes. So the reason why a lot of people have mental health issues, and I believe that it's because they have a parasite, is because they hijack our nervous system and our lymphatic system. And they're an alive creature. So you've got something alive, a frequency inside of your already alive body. And they do have the opportunity to control what you're thinking because they've hijacked our bodies. One example I like to give is Toxoplasmosis gondii, which is the cat parasite. And it actually brainwashes the mouse to be sexually attracted to the cat's urine and to go cuddle up with the cat in order to be eaten, so that the next stage of it is produced in the cat's gut by an enzyme.
That is insane.
It's mind controlling. And there's quite a few scenarios with just that one parasite that can create other issues inside of your life if you do have toxo. Some people actually go down to Mexico that are fighters and get toxo so that they remove the fear, because that's what toxo does to the brain. It goes
Really?
in, it removes the fear. If you're promiscuous and you're like, why did I sleep with this person, or why am I doing this? You should get tested for toxo. Those are the two biggest symptoms of toxo: is no fear. They actually did a study where people that died on crotch rockets had toxoplasmosis. They did a study, and 100% of the people had toxoplasmosis that they
Wow.
tested that died on crotch rockets, because you don't have no fear. You're like just zooming up and down with no worries, right?
If they can hide in the brain, I would assume then that they can potentially impact vision. Do you see that being the case?
I have done some research, and not just toxo of the brain, but they can cause seizures. And I say they, meaning tapeworms specifically. They can cross the blood-brain barrier because they're microscopic. So that's why it's so important just to be proactive. Don't eat pork that's raw. Make sure anything you eat is completely cooked. If they're in our blood, our tissue, and our muscle, they're in the animals that we're eating, blood's tissue and muscle. And even if you're a vegetarian or vegan, they're on our produce that's raw. So I really do advocate for don't eat raw produce when you're out and about in, countries, including the United States. Be conscientious about ice and water, because our water here in the United States is actually not great. I live in Seattle. It's not tested for nematodes. So I've tested the water here and it tested positive for nematodes. So even if you're eating produce that you think's been washed, has it been washed with good water? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's really just a thought process about protecting your body and being proactive. And then if you're like, I'm just going to do it, just take the Parafy kit prior to eating questionably or living questionably, and it'll do its best to make your body inhospitable, so that if you do come in contact with a heavy metal or a parasite or even mold, your body knows what to do and try and push it out with the assistance of the herbs.
You mentioned that we're essentially getting bombarded from everywhere: tap water, pets, foods. I hear numbers online that 95% of everyone has parasites. What's your estimate on how many people actually are walking around with parasite infections?
That is because of my estimate.
So that's
Just
your
so you
estimate.
know,
I
that
love it.
is my numbers. So 60 million Americans in the CDC, that's what they say. But you got to remember that with those numbers that we're getting from these governmental lettering, right? Those numbers are only from the testing. So if when I sent mine to LabCorp, it came back negative. When I sent it to Mexico, it came back positive. My number is not in that number because I didn't go through a test site that the CDC gets their numbers. So to me personally, I don't agree with the 60 million. I think it's way more than that. And that's from years ago, to be honest with you as well. So, but 90 to 95% is my number that I constantly tell everyone. And it's because we've never cleansed. So they just kind of stay in our bodies and they can be dormant until something super stressful happens or you disrupt them somehow. And then they start to come out and create chronic illness, autoimmune disease. And then you go to the doctor and they're not showing up on labs. They're not showing up in your stool because they're evaders. They know how to hide. They know how to not get caught because why would they want to leave? We are the best host.
Yeah.
we're the ultimate end result host for them, right?
A parasite infection something that get worse over time? Do they just, like you said, they can sort of remain dormant, but can they get worse over the span of 10, 20, 30 years?
Yes. They just grow more. They produce more eggs. They hold on to 6 to 8 times their weight in spores, heavy metals, viruses, bacteria, and other parasites. They literally live in a house that is protected by a biofilm, and you're trying to burn their house down in order to expose them. And so when you do just a random cleanse, like I did at the beginning of all of this, I did just a $30 tincture off of Amazon. The unfortunate thing is that that did not include a biofilm buster, right? So you got to go in and burn their house down. And you also need to bind because while you're burning their house down, all of the stuff that was in the house is like going into your body and absorbing into your body. And so you got to stop all of that or you could get sicker. And that's what happened to my husband and me is that we just did a random parasite cleanse, didn't realize that there's viruses and bacteria and heavy metals hold inside of that parasite. And so I actually had never tested positive for Epstein-Barr virus. I never had mono, and I had a spinal tap being tested for EBV, and it came back negative years before. All of a sudden, I do a parasite cleanse and I tested positive for Epstein-Barr virus. And so I started researching, well, why did that happen? What happened? And it's because I didn't do an herb that helps sweep out viruses. So I just started to
I
think,
see.
okay, yeah. And then we had heavy metals coming out of our body. We had parasites coming out of our body, eyes. I had one come out of my ear. I coughed one up. My husband had them come out of his skin like I did, and our urine. And it's because we weren't binding either.